My father has been a transit subway station manager for over 3 decades. In his line of work, there must always be someone on duty, which means he's worked every shift imaginable, including countless night shifts. The nights were usually quiet, with most trains running empty, a rare peace in the bustling city. He often mentioned this as the one solace of the night shift. However, there's one particular night that stands out, a night that has haunted him ever since. It was around 3 a.m. when my father boarded a train to move to his office at another station. The subway car was eerily empty, the kind of emptiness that amplifies every creak and groan of the train. He was alone as he took his seat, the dim lights casting long, wavering shadows across the worn floors. The quiet was almost oppressive, pressing in on him as the train rattled through the underground tunnels. At the next station, a man boarded, a tall, lanky figure dressed in a heavy, oversized coat and a knit beanie pulled low over his forehead. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, and when he looked at my father, it was a quick, almost nervous glance. The man didn't sit near him. Instead, he chose the farthest corner of the car, away from the flickering lights, where he seemed to melt into the shadows. But something about this man was unsettling. My father could feel the man's gaze on him, a heavy, almost tangible sensation. Every so often, the man would look up, his eyes locking onto my father's, before quickly looking away again. The air in the car grew thick with tension, each glance raising the hairs on the back of my father's neck. He tried to focus on anything else, the worn seats, the advertisements peeling at the edges, but his thoughts kept circling back to the man in the corner. When the train finally arrived at my father's stop, he wasted no time. He quickly exited the car, but as he did, he noticed the man was following. The sound of his own footsteps echoed off the grimy tiled walls as he walked towards his office, each step punctuated by the soft thud of the man's shoes behind him. My father reached his office door, the old wood creaking as he unlocked it, and before stepping inside, he glanced back. The man was still there, pacing back and forth about 50 feet away, his eyes never leaving my father. My father's heart raced as he shut the door behind him, the lock clicking into place with a finality that did little to calm his nerves. He sat at his desk, trying to shake off the encounter, but 5 minutes later, he heard it, the doorknob rattling, softly at first, then more insistently. Someone was trying to get in. "Who is it?" My father called out, his voice steadier than he felt. The response came almost immediately, a voice calm and unsettlingly composed. "I just want to talk." My father's stomach twisted at the familiarity of the voice. It was the man from the train. He knew trouble when he saw it, and every instinct screamed at him that this man was dangerous. He told the man to leave, his voice firm, but the knocking continued, a persistent tap 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 that sent chills down his spine. For what felt like an eternity, the man knocked, never raising his voice, never demanding entry, just knocking. My father, now on high alert, turned to the security camera feed on his desk. His fingers trembled as he brought up the camera aimed at the office door, and there he was, the man from the train, standing there in his heavy coat and beanie, his face partially obscured by the shadows. As if sensing he was being watched, the man abruptly stopped knocking. He stood still for a moment, then slowly turned and walked away, his figure disappearing from the camera's view. My father let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The man boarded the same car, sitting just a few seats away. This time, there was no attempt to hide his interest. The man stared directly at my father, his eyes dark and unwavering. My father, trying to maintain his composure, glanced back, offering a weak nod and a strained smile, a gesture of uneasy truce. But the man didn't smile back. He just kept staring, his eyes boring into my father, unblinking, relentless. The train ride to the next station was agonizingly slow, each second stretching into an eternity. My father could feel the man's gaze like a physical weight, pressing down on him. He kept his eyes forward, trying not to show his fear, but his mind was racing, calculating his next move. When the train finally came to a stop, my father didn't wait. He bolted up the stairs, his heart hammering in his chest, every instinct screaming at him to get away. But as he reached the street, he saw the man again, following, his pace quickening to match my father's. Panic surged through my father as he scanned the streets for any place that was still open, anywhere he could find refuge. Finally, he spotted a diner, its neon sign flickering weakly in the night. He dashed inside, the bell above the door jingling as he entered. He slumped into a booth, his eyes fixed on the window. The man stopped outside, just as before, staring in at him. For 10 agonizing seconds, their eyes met through the glass, and then, without a word, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the dark streets. My father sat there for what felt like hours, waiting, watching, but the man never returned. Eventually, he left the diner and made his way to his final station for the night, his nerves frayed, his mind racing with what had just happened. But the nightmare wasn't over. When my father reached his third office, he checked the security cameras out of lingering paranoia. His breath caught in his throat as he saw the man again, pacing outside the station, just 30 feet from the door. The man stopped, looked directly into the camera and froze, his eyes locking onto the lens as if he could see my father on the other side. For a full minute, the man didn't move, didn't blink, just stared into the camera. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he lowered his head and walked away, vanishing into the night. My father never saw him again, but the memory of that night still lingers. My friends and I were enjoying the weekend in the city, the streets alive with the festive spirit of the holiday season. It was late, around 2:00 a.m., when we finally decided to call it a night. We caught the first subway train we could find, expecting it to be nearly empty at that hour, and for the most part, it was. We were exhausted, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones, but there was a strange energy in the air, a lingering tension that none of us could quite place. We settled into our seats, the rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks lulling us into a false sense of security. But then, out of nowhere, we heard it, a commotion coming from the next car. It started as a muffled noise, something we could have easily ignored, but then it grew louder, more frantic. We glanced at each other, uncertain, before deciding to check it out. As we peered through the glass separating the cars, our blood ran cold. There were 2 men standing uncomfortably close to a woman who was seated alone. She was visibly distressed, her cries for help barely audible over the rumble of the train. The men were dressed in dark hoodies, their faces obscured, but their intentions were clear. One of my friends suggested we intervene, but as we moved closer, we saw the glint of metal in their hands. They were armed with handguns. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed my friends back, urging them to move to the next car. Fear gripped us as we hurried away, our footsteps echoing in the empty train. But as we retreated, one of the men noticed us. He pointed in our direction, and a surge of adrenaline shot through me. They were coming after us. We bolted through the train, our fear propelling us forward. Each car felt longer than the last, the doors seemingly heavier as we threw them open. The men were relentless, their footsteps growing louder behind us. We didn't stop until the train finally screeched to a halt at the next station. The doors slid open and we sprinted out, our breaths ragged, our hearts pounding. The station was eerily quiet, the dim lights casting long shadows across the tile floor. We ran, searching desperately for a place to hide. In the chaos, I lost sight of my friends, the panic blurring my vision. I ducked behind a garbage can, the cold metal pressing against my back as I tried to steady my breathing. The sound of footsteps drew closer, the men's voices low and menacing. I risked a glance through the narrow opening at the top of the bin, and there they were, one tall, dark-skinned, the other shorter and lighter, both frighteningly young. They moved with a predatory grace, their eyes scanning the station, searching for us. And then I heard it, words that sent a chill down my spine. If you find them, kill them. My breath caught in my throat, and I had to clamp a hand over my mouth to stop from gasping out loud. The gravity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a robbery, they were out for blood. I pressed myself further into the shadows, praying they wouldn't see me. They passed by, their guns no longer drawn, their footsteps receding into the distance. I stayed hidden for what felt like an eternity, my body trembling with fear. When I was sure they were gone, I bolted in the opposite direction, my legs feeling like lead. I found my friends huddled behind a large pillar, their faces pale with fear. We stayed there, crouched in the shadows, waiting for the danger to pass. But the shock wasn't over. As we peered around the pillar, we saw the woman from the train, the one we thought was the victim, walking toward the men. Her voice was sharp, demanding, "Where are they? Don't tell me you didn't get them." Our hearts sank as we realized the horrifying truth. She was working with them. They exchanged a few more words, too quiet for us to hear, before disappearing down the stairs to the platform, likely waiting for another train, another victim. We didn't move until we were sure they were gone. When we finally made our way out of the station, we called the police, our voices shaking as we described what had happened. But even now, I don't know if those men were ever caught or if they found another group of unsuspecting passengers to terrorize. My name is Sam, and I'm 22 years old. This is, without a doubt, the most terrifying experience of my life. I've lived in the city my whole life, and I rely on the subway to get around. It's part of the daily routine for millions of us, a mundane, often overlooked aspect of city living. But after that night, I'll never see it the same way again. It was a Saturday night, and I was on my way home from a party, something I did regularly. The subway was my usual mode of transportation. Even late at night, I had always felt relatively safe, even in the emptiest of stations. The thought of danger was always somewhere at the back of my mind, but it was more of an abstract idea than a real concern. That night, as I descended the steps into the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The station was cramped, the walls close enough to feel suffocating. The flickering lights cast long, eerie shadows, making the place feel even more claustrophobic. It was eerily silent, the kind of silence that makes every little noise seem amplified, more significant. I could hear my own footsteps echoing off the walls, each step sending a slight tremor through the floor. Every so often, a distant bang would echo through the tunnels, the source unseen, adding to the growing unease that settled in my chest. It was the kind of sound that could easily be dismissed during the day, but felt ominous in the dead of night. I was early for the train, so I sat on a bench, the cold metal seeping through my clothes. The silence pressed in on me, the distant sounds only making it more profound. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and rasping, cutting through the stillness like a knife. "Over here, buddy." I looked up, and my heart skipped a beat. There was a man standing on the tracks, just inside the tunnel, his head poking out. He was filthy, his clothes tattered, his hair matted with dirt. He looked to be in his early 40s, but it was hard to tell beneath the grime. His face was twisted into a grin revealing yellow teeth, with at least 3 of them missing. His eyes locked onto mine, and he didn't look away. Panic surged through me, but I did my best to appear calm. I looked away, pretending I hadn't heard him, hadn't seen him. But he wasn't going away. His laugh echoed through the tunnel, harsh and grating, and then another man appeared, just as dirty, just as unsettling. This one had a similar grin, a grotesque mimicry of the first, and he called out to me as well, "Come hang out with us in the tunnel." Their voices were taunting, mocking, and their eyes, they were fixed on me, unblinking, filled with something dark, something hungry. They stared at me as if I were prey, and they were the predators. The air seemed to thicken, growing heavy with tension, and the stench of something foul. I forced myself to stay still, to not react. I knew better than to engage with them, but their presence was oppressive, suffocating. The first man moved deeper into the tunnel, disappearing into the shadows, only to return moments later with something or someone. I had to look. My curiosity got the better of me, and what I saw nearly made me scream. There was a third figure now, but this one was different. It was hunched over, lifeless, its face pale and ghastly. One of the men was holding it up by the hair, showing me the face. A face that no longer held any life, any humanity. It was a severed head. I felt bile rise in my throat, the urge to vomit overwhelming. The sound of the train approaching was the only thing that kept me grounded, the only thing that stopped me from bolting right then and there. Relief washed over me as the train came into view, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a beacon. I stood up, ready to board the train, ready to get as far away from those men as possible. But as I got closer to the edge of the platform, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The two men were retreating into the tunnel, but the second man, the one in the back, was holding something in his hand. Something unmistakable. It was the severed head. He held it up for me to see, almost as if he were showing off a trophy. And then, just as the train pulled into the station, they disappeared from sight, swallowed by the darkness of the tunnel. I stumbled onto the train, my legs weak, my mind racing. The doors closed behind me, sealing me inside, but I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The head, lifeless and cold, the men's eyes, hungry and predatory. I planned to warn the conductor, but as the train started moving, I knew I couldn't stay in that station any longer. As the train entered the tunnel, I caught a glimpse of something that sent a new wave of terror through me. There were legs, barely visible, moving down the stairs to the platform. I didn't get a good look, but I knew they were coming after me. And then, as the train moved deeper into the tunnel, I saw them again. Those men, huddled against the railing inches from the train window. They were all looking right at me, their faces twisted into those same grotesque grins. I panicked, banging on the conductor's door, shouting that it was an emergency. When he finally opened it, I babbled out everything I had seen, my words tumbling over each other in my haste. He listened, his face growing pale, and then he radioed someone, reporting the incident. The ride to my stop felt like an eternity, the fear gnawing at my insides. But when I finally got there, I bolted out of the train, my heart pounding with relief. The air felt fresher, cleaner as I made my way to the surface, but the memory of what I had seen still clung to me like a shadow. Since then, I've been back to my friend's house, but I avoid that station at all costs. I'd rather take the extra long walk to the next station than risk another encounter like that. The subway used to be just another part of city life for me, something I didn't think twice about. But now, after that night, I know better. I know that the city's dark corners can hide the most horrifying things, and I'll never let my guard down again. If you've made it this far, you're 100% a horror fanatic and we approve. If you love our campfire-themed horror storytelling experience, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our daily uploads.